Well, I'm going to go ahead and jump in. It's after 6. Tonight we have a really wonderful speaker, Meredith Farkas from Norwich University. She writes the Information Wants to Be Free blog. That's one of just a few blogs I keep up with every day. And she recently won a teaching award for a WISE course that she was teaching. And she also last year won the ALA Lead at High-Tech Communication Award. So her blog is inspiring, and she's accomplished an amazing amount for you know, somebody that's been in the field for 5 years. She's accomplished in 5 years what most people don't do in 20. So and she's author of a book called Social Software for Libraries. So Meredith, we're really pleased you're here. And I wanted to let everybody know too, after Meredith's talk, Jeremy and I will be here to answer any questions about upcoming assignments and go over anything that you might like to go over. So welcome, Meredith, and I'll turn the mic over to you.
All right, thank you so much, Lori, and thanks everybody for being here this evening. I'm also an instructor for San Jose State's program. I teach a class on Web 2.0, which probably is so 5 minutes ago for y'all, since you're already up to Web 3.0, which I'm still not sure what that means. I'm sure you guys could probably tell me better, since I know I've heard a million different people tell me a million different things of what Web 3.0 is. But today I'm going to be talking about social networking in libraries, and I'm going to show you some examples that I think are particularly compelling of uses of social software in libraries that I think are particularly useful and inspiring. And then I'm going to follow it up with just a few practical tips on technology implementation in general that I think are really useful to keep in mind when you're implementing social technologies. All right. So first, I sort of wanted to get started by defining terms, even though I'm sure you're probably, with Web 3.0, are probably way ahead of me. But I think when you're talking about something like Web 2.0 or Web 3.0, it's kind of good to go back and define your terms and start with Web 1.0. And I've always seen Web 1.0 as really being about democratized access to information. I mean, I remember in the early 90s when I was doing like a summer program at the University of Pennsylvania, and that was the first time I ever used the web. I was on the Mosaic browser, and I was just blown away by how much access to information I had. Like, suddenly I didn't have to go to the library to look up who was in a specific movie. I could just go on the web, look it up, and have that information right at my fingertips. And it really changed the way a lot of us accessed information. And it didn't matter where in the world you were, because if you had access to the internet, you had access to that same wealth of information. And you know, back then though, most of us really interacted with the web as consumers of information rather than as producers of content. You know, back then to create a web page took a lot more effort than it does now. I mean, you needed a web server, space on a web server. You needed web design skills, and even for things like what am I thinking of? Things like Usenet news groups, where you could, have discussions, and it was pretty easy to post to things like that. They were usually for the really serious fans. I mean, I used to be on an Ayn Rand chat Usenet news group, and I was so intimidated that because people would just skewer anyone who didn't know as much about Ayn Rand as they did. So, I felt like adding content to the web was really for the serious techie or the serious hobbyist. And what I see Web 2.0 is being about is democratized participation. I mean, it's kind of amazing now how if you have access to a keyboard and can type content into a box, you can add your ideas, your photographs, your ratings of a product or a hotel, all of this to this amazing knowledge base that the web is becoming. Because now it's not just companies and techies and universities that are creating content on the web. Now it's just regular people. It's people in their 80s who are writing about their experiences in World War II. It's people, it's young children who are putting their poetry online and their photographs. It really runs the gamut, and we have all of these amateurs basically adding their unique knowledge to the web, which is creating this just incredible knowledge base that we can all benefit from. So I see Web 2.0 as being about the easy ability to participate on the web. I ran new scripts, sorry. Sorry, that got me. Yeah, oh my god, I was such a geek in high school. Ayn Rand. So when I wrote my book, Social Software and Libraries, I had to come up with a definition of social software, and I sort of waited until I'd written the entire book to come up with my definition, because I think it's really hard to come up with any one definition that actually encompasses all of the tools that I was talking about in my book. So this is the one I came up with, and feel free to disagree with me. I'm not the lone expert on social software. And I know some of my students did disagree with this in my class. So I thought that to be considered social software, a tool must meet at least two of the following conditions. It allows people to communicate, collaborate, and build community online. It can be syndicated, shared, reused, or remixed, or it facilitates syndication. So that's something, it's RSS feeds or something that has RSS. Or it allows people to easily learn from and capitalize on the behavior or knowledge of others. So I'm going to talk now about some social software trends for libraries and show you some examples that really excite me, that things that libraries are doing right now. So the first way that I really like using social software is to highlight our collections, because that's one thing that libraries have a really hard time with. I'm often getting complaints from students, oh gosh, I wish you had this journal. I'll read the surveys from our distance learners and they'll say, oh, I wish you had this journal, or I wish you had this service. And I'm thinking, oh my god, we do have this. And how do I communicate that more effectively to students and faculty so that they do know what we have, and that these things that they're basically paying for with their tuition dollars isn't going to waste. So one thing I really like is how NCSU, North Carolina State University's Special Collections, is using Flickr to actually make their Special Collections photographs more accessible to the public. So they have a regular website where they're providing, where they have all of their, digital collections and whatnot, but they've also put their historical photos on Flickr so that people can find this stuff more easily. Because a lot of Flickr is, a major social photo sharing site, and a lot of people who would be interested in historical photos of NCSU probably would never think to visit the Special Collections site. So this makes it more accessible. You see that they added this photo to all these different pools of photos on Flickr, to a pool of photos of Raleigh, North Carolina, of historic and old photos. And one thing I really like about this example is that someone actually asked a question about the location of this photo. And based on that question, the Special Collections staff actually realized that they had misidentified the photo, which is just, that's exactly what you want participatory media for. What a great way to, add context and information to your photos, put them on Flickr, and have people, comment on them and add information. I know, the Library of Congress has put tons and tons of historical photos on Flickr, and I saw one about Japanese internment. It was pictures of a Japanese internment camp. And people had all written just dozens of comments on this, and it was really fascinating to see people's reactions to it. People linked to other historical documents. So I think this is a great way of people discovering your photos, but also adding additional information and context. This is a screenshot from the University of Alberta Library's website, and what they have are RSS feeds for their new books by subject. So if you're interested, say, in American history, you can subscribe to the RSS feed of American history, and as soon as a new book is cataloged in their ILS, you'll get information about it. And the nice thing about RSS is people can subscribe to it however they want. They can get it via, my Yahoo or iGoogle. They can get it via text message, email, through an RSS reader, through their email client like Exchange, like Outlook. And I just think that's such a great way for people to really keep up with the new content that's coming into the library, especially for faculty and graduate students who are probably going to be particularly interested in the collections in their area. So whether we like it or not, all students pretty much are going to be using the Wikipedia to some extent. I mean, frankly, I use it quite a lot. I find often the links at the bottom of an entry incredibly useful for finding primary source documents and other more scholarly pieces on that subject. For example, I was looking at the Cold War page recently when I was teaching a history class that was on the Cold War, and I found all of these great primary source collections there. So what the University of Washington did, here's a screenshot of the bottom of this Tacoma Narrows Bridge entry. The University of Washington libraries, they posted a link to their digital collections on the Tacoma Narrows Bridge collapse in the list of links in the Wikipedia. I think this is completely brilliant because, you picture a high school student doing research on the Tacoma Narrows Bridge collapse. Are they going to think, wow, I wonder if the University of Washington Libraries has a digital collection on the Tacoma Narrows Bridge collapse? That's highly unlikely. But instead, they're probably going to go to the Wikipedia and look at what's available there. And in this case, they're going to stumble upon a link to the University of Washington's digital collections. That's brilliant. It's just such a great idea. And they've posted links to lots of other Wikipedia pages that are relevant to their digital collections. So if we have these great, unique digital collections and they're related to certain articles in Wikipedia, it makes sense to post links to those collections to make them more visible. We can also create community around our collections, get people talking about them and having interesting conversations. Bookspace is an online community for book lovers at the Hennepin County Public Library. This is one of my absolute favorite online communities that was created by a library. This is basically just a community for book lovers where people can comment, people can create book lists. I mean, most of our libraries, this looks like a typical catalog entry, but unlike in most catalogs, you'll see here that there's a place where people can comment. And so if you're interested in a specific book, it would be great to see what other people thought about it before you really invest the time in getting the book out of the library and reading it. And in addition, you can also post your own comments. If you have strong feelings about a book, either you loved it or you absolutely hated it, this is a great space to provide that information. So the community in this sense is really providing sort of the reader's advisory service. In addition, they can create lists here. So you'll see these are readers lists where any member of the community can create an annotated list of books on any subject they're interested in. It could just be, it's sort of like Amazon's List Mania. It could just be my favorite books or books my toddler likes. This one here is on baseball, and you'll see for after each description that it comes with the call number of the book so that people can easily find it if they're interested in it. So at public libraries, people are always providing readers advisory services. I certainly did it when I worked in a public library, but I wasn't knowledgeable about every single genre that's out there. I know very little about, for example, mysteries, but there were patrons who knew tons, who just read them like they're going out of style. And for them to be able to create lists like this, they're basically doing our Reader's Advisory work for us, where everyone can benefit from their knowledge about that genre. Another way that libraries can use social software is to collect and disseminate knowledge. And this is actually probably tied for my favorite online community created by a library. And actually, Vicki, the community manager of Skokie.net, is going to be Vicki's in my other Web 2.0 class. She's actually, the community manager is actually going to be speaking to our class next week. So you're going to hear a lot more about Skokie.net. This is an online community created by the Skokie Public Library. They actually use Drupal, which is an open source content management system, to create this site. It's actually also the same thing that I use to create my classroom for my San Jose State class. But this is basically just a community information site where anyone can add information. They can add things about events, or about, there have people here writing stories about what Skokie was like, 50 years ago and their remembrances. They have different communities for ethnic groups where people can post information and ideas, and anyone can post this information. You'll see here there's a very easy interface for creating a story. And it's not like it's going to go up immediately, so if somebody's writing something profane, it's going to show up on the site. It does have some moderation. Somebody looks at it and then approves it. But this is such an easy way for members of the community basically to create this huge bulletin board and knowledge base online, which is making the library really the online hub of their community. And I'm frankly surprised that more public libraries aren't doing something like this, because it's such a great way to make the library more relevant in the lives of the tech-savvy members of the population who are interested in online content. Pen Tags is basically like Delicious. It's a social bookmarking site that was created specifically for use by students, faculty, and staff at the University of Pennsylvania. So members of the UPenn community can add websites, they can add books from the catalog to their collection of research materials so that they have all of their stuff collected in one place. And you'll see here that you can collect things into sort of projects, or in this case a bibliography, where you can have all of your research on a specific topic in one place. And this is one that's on video games and violence. Now, when somebody bookmarks an actual book from the catalog in Pen Tags, you'll see that in the catalog entry, towards the bottom of it, it will show that this resource has been posted in Pen Tags. It will give the annotation, which is a nice little summary of the book. It'll show the tags that the person used to describe the book, and show a link to the project, to that Video Games and Violence bibliography. So if somebody is doing research on video games and violence, someone later on, this is going to be an incredibly useful find, obviously, because that person basically did the research for them. Now, we're often creating research guides, subject guides, course guides, but it's kind of rare that we get so granular that we're actually going to be creating one on video games and violence. So I think it's great that something like this exists that really allows sort of the patrons to, just like with Bookspace, they're doing the work of the librarians in providing readers advisory services. In this, they're kind of creating our research guides for us, which is, just such a great way to capitalize on the knowledge of our users. Why have all that research be wasted? I know there was a OCLC study maybe 2.5 years ago that had shown that use of most websites was way up, especially obviously social networking sites. And one of the only types of sites that they found that was down was the library, in terms of visits, was the library website. People simply are not going to the library website. They don't think there's anything there that would be useful to them. So we need to find ways to put our content, our services, our information where our users are. And that means going wherever they happen to congregate. And one great place online is Facebook. And there are a lot of libraries providing services in Facebook these days. This is one of my favorites, the Manchester Library and Information Services page. This is a library out of the UK. And I love they provide information, interesting and useful information very regularly on this page. And then they have another page where they've used their web design skills to actually make it look like a regular website where people can actually search the catalog. There are links to other services. Some libraries even have Meebo widgets that are for instant messaging that are sitting inside of Facebook, or when you click on it, a widget's going to pop up where you can chat with a librarian. I just think this is such an important way for us to be providing outreach. It's not like we're recreating our website, but we are sort of providing these little hooks to bring them back to our website so that they can do a search and go into our catalog, so that they can see what we have to offer and then link back to that. Another place, and you guys certainly know this quite well, I'm sure, as distance learners, another great place to be providing outreach as librarians is within the course management system. And this is something we take very seriously at Norwich. I used to be the distance learning librarian, and I'm now the head of instruction. But when I started as a distance learning librarian, I was very convinced that we had to put to create a library web presence specifically for distance learners that lived inside of the course management system. So this was basically a portal to library services, everything that a distance learner needed that was specifically designed for them and lived inside the course management system. And I think that's incredibly important because basically Angel, or in this case it was WebCT, that is their online home. This is your online campus. And to ask you, oh, what type of CMS does Norwich use? We used to use WebCT. Actually, this is kind of an old screenshot because I couldn't get a good one of Angel, but we do use Angel now, just like you guys do. And we're much happier with it than we were with WebCT. So, oh God, what was I saying? Yes. So if the CMS is your basically your online campus, asking you to leave and go to a different site to use the library, I always think that that's kind of like asking somebody to drive across town to go use the library. It's just another barrier. So why not put the library right where your users are and specifically the services that they need? It's also important to have transparent conversations with our users. And Virginia Commonwealth University does such a brilliant job with this. This is the library suggestion blog that they have. And instead of just having a comment box where people can post a comment and then somebody in the library staff looks at it, they actually post those comments that users give, whether good or bad, and then a relevant staff member ends up answering them. And I think that is such a great idea because, I know I would never provide a comment to one of those web forms, because who knows what's going to happen with it. You feel like when you're typing it in and sending it, it's just going to disappear into a black hole. You don't know if anyone's even going to respond or make a change based on it. By making this so public, I feel like they're really having these great transparent conversations with their users, and they're putting their money where their mouth is. They're saying, we really care about your feedback. We want to make the library reflect your needs, and we're going to answer every comment and criticism that we get. I love that. The Ann Arbor District Library also does a great job with communicating with their users in a transparent way. They have tons and tons of different blogs. This is a screenshot from the director's blog, where their director, Josie Parker, talks about sort of the larger macro issues of the library. And the great thing about her blog is that the comments are open, and the Ann Arbor District Library blogs get lots of comments. There were like 20-some comments on that specific post, and what I really like is that you'll see that she actually answers every single comment. She responds to it, whether positive or negative, and I think that's really nice, because so many library blogs, even when they do get comments, they don't know how to handle them really well. And to have the director responding to every comment really makes patrons feel like the library cares about them. So I think also, not just, social software is not just great for patron-facing applications. It's also amazingly useful for improving internal knowledge sharing among staff. And this is something we tend to be really bad about at libraries, I've found. This is one of my favorite sort of knowledge sharing tools for staff, and this is the Reference at Newman Library blog at Baruch College. And they, I know at my library, the way we share information at the reference desk, sometimes we'll send emails, sometimes we'll put post-it notes at the desk, but those things disappear, and then you'll get the same assignment next year, and you won't remember what resources were useful. With a blog like this, they post all sorts of content that all of the members of the reference staff would find useful. Like, for example, toner is needed at ref desk computer. Like, we just had a problem with a printer the other day, and I called IT, and I found out that another reference librarian had already called about it. It might have been nice to know that before I had called. So, they provide all that sort of information. They talk about different resources, database trials they have, all sorts of information. And the nice thing about this, it's not like emails where you're going to delete it. All of that content is archived, where you can easily search for it and find the information on that assignment that came up 2 years ago that really stumped you guys, and what resources you ended up using. Another great tool, obviously, for sharing knowledge is a wiki. And this is not a very pretty wiki, but this is a wiki from Antioch University, New England's libraries. And they use this basically as a front desk manual for anyone working at the circulation desk. And it has information on anything someone could need working at the desk, from, troubleshooting the photocopiers and the Xerox machine, to, in this case, adding a patron to their catalog. And I think this is nice, because I know we have a lot of work study students who work at our circulation desk. And, they get a training, but they're not going to get trained in every minute thing that could possibly come up when they're at the desk. So sometimes things are going to come up that they're not trained for. And isn't it great to have a resource like this that provides all of that information easily at their fingertips? And you also benefit from the fact that it's a wiki, and you can collect knowledge from all members of the staff, because we all have different areas of expertise, and all members of the staff can update this and add information and add the stuff that they really know about. We can also use social software to communicate with users at the point of need. One of my favorite blogs for that is the business blog at Ohio University Libraries. Chad Boninger, I've had I'm a huge fan of his. I've had him as a guest speaker several times for different events that I've done and different classes. He's the business librarian at Ohio University Library, and he has a great relationship with the faculty at the university in his area and knows when assignments are coming up. And rather than waiting for 20 or 30 students to come to the desk with the exact same question and answering it over and over and over again, he basically provides reference instruction right here at the point of need, giving them useful advice and tips on the blog when he knows about an assignment coming up. And I just think that's such a fantastic idea, especially because for every patron who does, come to the desk, there are probably 2 or 3 others who never ask the questions and who struggle on their own with this. So to provide that sort of proactive reference instruction, I think is a fantastic idea. This is this is something I really like, which I think all library catalogs should have. We don't have this in ours, and I really think we should. When you get a 0 result in a catalog, in a library catalog, you often don't know what to do next, and a lot of people just sort of give up. This is the catalog from the Topeka and Shawnee County Public Library, and when you do a search and misspell something or whatever in their catalog and you don't find anything, you see a link that says Ask Now. When you click on that, it pops open that little window there, that Ask a Librarian window, where you can immediately, as long as somebody's online, can immediately start chatting with a librarian and ask them, why did nothing come up when I typed this in, and maybe find out that it was a misspelling or that you should try this different keyword. And having that right there at the point of need, I think, makes it more likely that someone's going to ask for help there. So here's a couple of basic strategies for implementing social software. This is a screenshot that I love because it's about the kid in the candy store, and this is sort of how I am with technology. I get so excited about this stuff. I hear about these new technologies and I just get giddy and silly and stupid, and I just want to use them at my library. And I have to temper that with and be pragmatic about technology implementation. You can't just say, oh my God, wikis are so awesome, I'm going to start using them in my library. Tomorrow I'm going to find a cool use for them and do something with it. That's not how it works. You don't walk around with a hammer looking for nails to put in. You use the right tool for the right job, and the need has to come first. If you have a need to better collect knowledge from your users or from faculty or from librarians, yeah, a wiki is a great tool, but the need has to come first. There's a tool for every need, and and these tools are not just things to play with and to implement things that are just sort of frivolous. And I know a lot of librarians have done that, including me, and it's a huge mistake. Things like that are never successful. It's also important that we really know our users. And I think we often make a lot of assumptions that, I read this EDUCAUSE article about the NetGen student, and now I know what my students are like at, Norwich or wherever. And I don't think we can make assumptions like that. Every university, every public library, every school library has a different and unique user population. We need to understand, what technologies do our users use? What kind of culture do they have with using those technologies? Will our users feel like us going into Facebook is an invasion of their privacy, or would they welcome the library being in that space? We need to understand how our users do research. This is a screenshot from Surveying Students, the undergraduate research project at the University of Rochester. This is a great study. It's freely available from ACRL, the ebook. And they actually hired an anthropologist and did an ethnographic study of their users, where instead of asking users what they think of library services, they actually observed students doing research, saw how they used technologies and tools, saw what process they went through to better understand how they could serve their users and meet their users at sort of those pain points when the users actually needed help. Libraries also need to develop a risk-tolerant culture. You know, for every success that I've had at my library, I've had at least one failure where I have tried something, experimented with something, and it didn't work out. But every time I've learned something valuable from that experience. I learned something about my student population. I learned something about a technology that maybe it just didn't work with that population. Maybe my population needs a different way of providing outreach. So, you know, a lot of libraries, they want to create this like perfect service that isn't going to fail. And you know what? Until we put something out there, we're often not going to know exactly how something's going to do. So it's important that we're willing to experiment with technologies. And I am so lucky to have a director who is always open to trying new things and experimenting, as long as we can afterwards, if something does fail, you know, sort of debrief on it and figure out what we learned from that experience. Because I think until you do fail, I think you often learn more from failing than from a success. We also need to develop a learning culture at our libraries. It's absolutely critical that not only, you know, the people within MLS or the administrators or whatever, that not only those people have access to professional development funds or have time to learn about new technologies. That creates the situation where you have one group of staff who is very up on new tech and trends in the profession, and another half of the population or more that has no clue about it. And we need to give people time to learn. We need to give them opportunities to learn. And we should make keeping up with trends in the profession and trends in technology a part of every librarian's job description. We should also involve staff at all levels in planning. This is a big one because I think a lot of libraries often plan new technology projects with just the tech-savvy staff. You know, you get the people who are really into wikis and have been using them for years, and those are the people who create the library's wiki. And I don't really personally think that's a good idea. I think it's important to involve staff who maybe aren't into that technology, who maybe have never used a wiki or are even not that into technology in general, because those people are going to see flaws that people who've been using the technology for years never would, because after a while you get tunnel vision with any technology. So it's good to have people with different perspectives, you know, showing you some of the flaws in your ideas or different ways of looking at things. It's also important to capitalize on your network. I think that every librarian should spend some time during their workday on Facebook or Twitter or something, building a professional network. I don't think of this as something that's frivolous. I think it's critical to make friends with people who are knowledgeable about the subjects that you're interested in, because I know, you know, I see Facebook as my professional Rolodex. And when I need expertise from someone, maybe on wikis or on you know, Web 3.0 or whatever, I can ask someone who I know is knowledgeable about that and get help. I know when I was first starting to use Drupal, that content management system, I asked my friend who knows about Drupal a lot of questions, and he gave me a ton of help. So, you know, we can never be experts in everything, so it's great to have a strong professional network that you can rely on when you need help. Finally, it's really important that administrators in libraries understand that time has to be devoted to these technologies. I think a lot of people think, oh, well, wikis are free, blogs are free, instant messaging is free to set up. You know, we don't have to devote any additional time to these new technologies. And that's why we have, you know, dozens and dozens and dozens of library blogs that haven't been updated in 3, 4, 5, 6 years. Because people don't realize that you need to plan for these Web 2.0 technologies the same way you would for any technology you implement at a library. Blogs, you know, need maintenance. You have to upgrade the software periodically. People have to moderate the comments. You need to have a posting schedule and, you know, sort of like a reference schedule where you know that someone's going to be posting content each week so that, you know, the blog is regularly updated. all of these technologies require time, and you can't just say to someone who already has a super full 40-hour work schedule, well, now I want you to start creating educational podcasts, and I'd like you to also start blogging for our users. And no, I'm not going to take away any of your duties. This just doesn't work. And I think this has been a huge problem with social software and libraries, is that people haven't taken it as seriously as they do technologies that they pay for. So I'd be happy to take any questions you might have right now about social software, or please feel free to contact me, email me, whatever, anytime. I'm more than happy to help. My slides are actually up at my presentation wiki as well, meredithfarkas.wetpaint.com. So you can access them there as well. Yeah, happy to take questions now.
Meredith, thanks so much. This was an excellent presentation again, and I'll clear the mic for questions, but thank you very much.
I was interested in that wiki sort of setup that you had for circulation staff. I was wondering if there was a particular application that you would recommend that it would be very easy for staff who are not that technological savvy to get going and using fairly quickly.
Yes, in terms of wiki software, yeah, I definitely actually would not recommend the software that Antioch University, New England uses. It's called SeedWiki, and I think it's one of the worst in terms of user interface. I'm honestly surprised that anyone uses it. I think anyone that has a WYSIWYG editor is going to be ideal. I like Wet Paint is good. PBWorks, which used to be PBWiki, is a nice option. I know a lot of people in K through 12 use Wikispaces, which I think is mainly because they were the first to take ads off of a free wiki, if you say that you're using it for educational use. Those are probably the three big ones that I think are the most user-friendly. But there's so much wiki software out there, and those are just hosted ones. There are lots that you can actually install on your own server and actually run. I know in my library we use wikis as our subject guides, and we actually use MediaWiki, which is the same software that runs the Wikipedia. I don't recommend that for library staff that aren't tech savvy, because it doesn't come with a WYSIWYG editor, and I think without a WYSIWYG editor, it's going to be nearly impossible to get staff that isn't tech savvy to actually use it. But I'm a huge fan of MediaWiki software, just for my own personal use, definitely. Oh, I see another question. In your opinion, do you think it's important to teach Drupal in a library science program? I think it's certainly a useful content management system. I think if people are interested in learning management systems, in systems for building online communities, I think Drupal is an ideal thing to teach, because it is just such a flexible technology. I mean, there are people using Drupal for all sorts of sites. We actually use Drupal now for our newly redesigned library website for distance learners at Norwich. I use it for my classroom, for my Web 2.0 class. It was used for the online community at Skokie Public Library. So, I would love to see that getting taught more. I've really been wanting to actually teach a class specifically on online communities, and I think I would definitely teach Drupal in that. I guess the problem is, you need some you need somewhere to install it, and I guess probably the folks at the library school would have to support that, which they might be less than thrilled about, because I know they support a lot of social technologies right now, so another one might be a bit overwhelming.
Yeah, this is Jeremy Kemp. I think I might do the links a little bit different next time. Sorry for link spamming you there. But my question is about the delicate nature of online communities. It seems like you can't really push them. You kind of have to pull them and facilitate them. So how do you get one started if there's nothing happening? How do you go about doing that?
Well, yeah, that's really complicated, and it honestly depends on the tool that you're using. I think sometimes you need to get out of the community, out of the online community, and provide outreach where your users actually are congregating. You know, maybe you need to, you know, if all of your users are in Facebook and you're trying to get them to use some online community that's on your website, you need to start you know, providing information in that space. Maybe have a contest in Facebook for people to, you know, design a logo for your online community. Get people involved in some way with the community so that they at least get their feet wet with it. Also, you know, especially with public libraries and actually with any type of library, really, you know, maybe you need to get out of your library and visit people where they are and talk to them about the community, and really get patrons involved in developing that community rather than the library building something. I think co-creating something with patrons is a really valuable thing. You know, we're actually going to be building a Facebook page finally at my library, and we're going to enlist some of our work study students to help us develop it, because I think there's no better way to engage students than to actually have them help you create the community space. But I think it is really, really hard to build, you know, an engaging community. And sometimes, honestly, I'd love to say that there's a magic bullet, but sometimes it just depends on your population. I mean, you see all this great stuff going on with like the Ann Arbor District Library where they're getting so many comments. Well, that is one of the most civically minded, engaged populations in the country. And I think a lot of people saw what Ann Arbor District Library did and thought, oh, I'm going to create a lot of blogs, I'm going to get all this conversation going, and it didn't happen. But, you know, with blogs, I think it's just about posting really interesting content regularly. Just posting boring news stuff is not going to engage your population. Yeah, yes, there is no Facebook page for my library. You know, my director wasn't too keen on it for a while, and now she's finally warmed up to the idea of us having a presence in that space. So, you know, wasn't something I was going to push that strongly. You know, I wasn't going to force the issue. But now that she's warming up to the idea, I'm definitely gung-ho on doing it. You know, and I don't think every technology, you know, we don't have a lot of things at our library. You know, it just depends on reaching the population that you work with using the tools that they actually use. So, you know, different tools aren't going to be right for every population, but at most schools I would say a Facebook page is probably a pretty safe bet.
Any last questions for Meredith? I guess I just wanted to make a comment. Your blog is a community of its own, Meredith. If you haven't read Information Wants to Be Free, I've rarely seen a blog that gets readers so engaged that it starts and continues a conversation. And sometimes you'll have a posting that has 50 comments, and you respond to those, and so you've created a really strong community just around your own blog.
Yeah, I think it's really important, I think, when building a blog community, like you said, to really post compelling content that's going to get people talking. And it took me a long time as a blogger to sort of find my comfort zone with that, because I do tend towards, revealing more personal stuff. I mean, not intensely personal things, but personal things sort of to create a teachable moment, to make a point that would be hopefully useful to other people. Like I've written posts on, that I used to have performance anxiety and was just absolutely terrified of public speaking, and now I'm really comfortable with that, and sort of to try to inspire people who are afraid to do that. So I think, oh, thank you, Holly. So I think, it's really important to post things that, maybe sometimes make you a little uncomfortable, maybe are a little controversial, things that are going to get people talking and discussing things, rather than just sort of rehashing news. But I think it does take a while to find your own comfort zone with blogging, where you can sort of get your personal voice out there without feeling like you're giving too much information that is personal.
Meredith, you mentioned in your blog, thanks to Roy Tennant, and you also mentioned your director there and being open. What's the role of a mentor, and in your case a mentee, in a technology and community setting? So how can you be a good mentee in that setting?
Great question. Yeah, I've been incredibly lucky to have, people like Roy Tennant, who sort of took me under their wing, early in my career and really encouraged me to try new things. I think the role of a mentee is just to listen to people's wisdom and be grateful for it, and eventually to pay it forward. Roy is a great example. I was not that confident about speaking, and especially, when I actually started speaking and got a lot of, people asking me to speak, I had a really hard time, asking for money to give a talk. I found that just completely intimidating, and I didn't really know what I was worth. And to have somebody who sort of coached me on that and helped me feel more confident in myself was just great. So as a mentee, I pretty much just listened and asked for help when I needed advice on something. There were just a lot of things that came up in my life that I had never experienced before, and just asking, for advice on those things was just so amazingly helpful. But now in the position I'm in, I feel like I'm at a place where I can mentor other new librarians and give them advice and help along the way, and the sort of encouragement that I got when I began. So I think any mentee should, always have an eye towards helping other people later on, because, very soon you'll be the experts, and you'll be the ones who can offer your wisdom. And before you know it, it won't be 20 years from now. It'll be just a couple of years.
Any further questions for Meredith? Thanks again, Meredith.
So much for having me, everyone. I really enjoyed chatting with you all, and take care.
Okay, great. And that segues into the second part of the conversation. And Lori's private IMing, do we want to offer? We definitely want to offer to answer questions about the course. I apologize for not being at Lori's session. last week, and it sounded like a great session. And I think I've heard that there are some follow-up questions, so let's get to it. If you're confused about any aspect of the course or you want to know more, now's the time. The paper assignment did ask folks to ping Lori and I today, just a very quick email to describe your paper proposal. We're not going to, I don't think we're going to be penalizing anybody about that, but please do send a quick email about your topic. And I'm sorry, that's not the paper, that's the project or program.
Anne, are you interested in what type of libraries and what type of services are you interested in? If you're interested in like reference, you could do digital reference in general. You could do instant message reference. You could do text message reference. You could do, video reference. If you're interested in teens, there's a bunch of different stuff you could do there. With the downloadable audio books, you could do downloadable media. Some companies like Overdrive are allowing patrons to download video now. You could do digital imaging and some of the new interactive stuff that's coming along with digital imaging collections where they create a community around them. Here's an example of a project where we created podcasts. Those are some ideas. Andrew, the paper the paper is the same as a project. You write a proposal for a new service or a emerging trend you would like to see happen in your library. And that's a great topic. And there's a lot going on with Overdrive right now. The downloadable video. Also, they have some smartphone applications. They're also working really closely with Sony e-readers so that somebody can check on their phone and get linked up with the closest library with content there. So there's a lot of different things you could do. I hope that helps a little bit. And then, Andrew, yes, the presentation is related to your project or paper. I also wanted to say, if there's a lot happening in the mobile technology area, and, you're welcome to come to the conference tomorrow and Thursday for free. Even if you can't come and you want to access the archives later, you can sign up. You need to sign up and then you'll have your login and access. We do have a speaker from Overdrive tomorrow too. We've also got a speaker from EBSCO. They're allowing access to databases on your mobile phone. So those are some ideas too.
So just to clarify or repeat that again, the paper, which is the proposal project, it's an 8 to 10 page paper about that, is due on the 24th. And we were asking you just to send an email giving us a very quick overview of what you were looking at. And then that is due, it's due on the 24th, and then 2 months later, a month later, you're going to be giving a presentation on that topic. So, and the presentations will be in times between the 12th of May and the 17th of May. So the paper, the proposal there, the project, is presented later on in the term. How many, I'm just curious, how many people who are here today, right now, were not at Lori's session last week? So it looks like there's about five or six of you that were not at Lori's session last week, talking about the difference and the timeline for participation in the forums as a leader, and also the development of the collections as a participant and a leader. So it might be good for us to go over that now. I wasn't there, but I think one of the key questions that was answered was, can the forum discussions be done as a group? So can all of you get together and decide what you're going to be doing in leading the discussions for the seminar? And the answer to that, as I understood it, and it makes sense, is that the team is welcome to arrange the work however they would like. So if everybody wants to post through a single speaker, in a sense, they can do that. Me personally, if I were working on a team, I would want everybody to jump into the forum and everybody to contribute to it. But if you all agree and you tell us up front, you can work on the discussions in the forum and lead them as a group. Does that sound right, Lori?
Yes, that's exactly right.
Another interesting feature about the collections is that the leaders are only stepping into the collections once the participants are done. So 2/3 of you are right now developing the collections in PBWorks, and then after your deadline is over, the leaders step in and massage that content. So I think it's interesting the way that's arranged, because it sort of mirrors what you would be doing in a regular library setting. You are working with user-generated content in terms of community contributions. Just like Meredith was talking about, people come in and contribute to the library community, and then the librarians come in to some degree and monitor and moderate that commentary, and then also the collections as well. So you are moderating user-generated content. So that's an interesting feature of the chorus.
Any other questions you have for us this evening?
You know, it's interesting. I don't want to get too deep into it right now, but it's in the syllabus. So the definition of Web 3.0, I think the strictest definition of Web 3.0 would be semantic web. Take a look at the video that started out the term. That's probably the strictest definition of Web 3.0.
Okay, if you have any questions, please email us and we'll get right back to you. And we'll keep you up to date on when we make the lectures and things available in the seminars. Thanks for a great interactive session this evening.